on behalf of the American people, which are to advance the national security interests of the United States. I also want to thank Ranking Member Frankel, as well as Ranking Member DeLauro, and all the members of the subcommittee for your partnership in developing this important bill. The bill before us today delivers on President Trump's America First agenda. First and foremost, by drastically reducing spending, funding is cut by 22% from the enacted level. The greatest threat to our country's stability and security is our debt. And this bill dramatically but responsibly reins in spending. These cuts are in addition to the 6% cut achieved in the final enacted version of the fiscal year 24 State and Foreign Operations Act, which was carried forward in the CR. The bill prioritizes our national security, especially in the Western Hemisphere, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. It provides unwavering support for Israel and fully funds the United States-Israel Memorandum of Understanding by providing $3.3 billion in security assistance to allow Israel to defend herself from existential threats. Other key partners and allies in the Middle East, such as Egypt and Jordan, are strongly supported. The bill includes funding and conditions to confront the national security threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party, including through a new provision that prohibits support for academic institutions partnering in STEM programs with PRC or the CCP-controlled colleges in Communist China, and continues to prohibit foreign assistance from being used to repay loans to the PRC. $500 million in foreign military financing is provided for Taiwan, and strong support is provided for other key partners in the Indo-Pacific, such as the Philippines and the Pacific Island countries. This bill continues important investments to combat the trafficking of fentanyl and the transnational criminal organizations behind the scourge of drug addiction confronting every community in America. The bill makes clear that those countries who are not willing to cooperate on issues of direct importance to Americans will be held accountable. The days of a weak American foreign policy are over. The bill cuts or withholds aid to countries that are no longer advancing shared interests, such as Colombia, due to the Petro administration's, frankly, abject failures in preventing political violence, creating economic deterioration, and emboldening transnational criminals. South Africa, unless they cease cooperation with our adversaries and uphold the rule of law. And Mexico, until they meet the requirements on the water deliveries to the United States in accordance with the terms of the 1944 Water Treaty. The bill also blocks assistance to anyone who supports, finances, or facilitates the operations of the Cuban Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces or Ministry of the Interior. I'm very grateful that President Trump and Secretary Rubio used language I included in the fiscal year 2024 bill to sanction the anti-American thugs in the Cuban regime who work closely with America's adversaries. The bill upholds the United Nations and other international organizations accountable. The bill holds the UN and other international organizations accountable and brings greater scrutiny to the actions of member states, including their voting records at the United Nations in determining the allocation of funds. No funds are included for the United Nations regular budget, and funds are prohibited to the World Health Organization, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry Against Israel, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, known as UNRWA, the United Nations Human Rights Council, the International Criminal Court, and the International Court of Justice. Furthermore, The bill includes a new provision that demands justice for victims murdered in the October 7th terrorist attack, including American citizens, by requiring full accountability for UNRWA staff involved in that vicious attack. These are just a few of the examples of what America First foreign policy looks like in this bill. But there's a lot more. The bill prohibits funds for controversial or ineffective programs that Americans don't support and our allies and partners don't need. The bill supports full implementation of key executive orders that reflect a clear commitment to the national sovereignty, the security of our borders, limited government, and American values, including those related to restoring free speech and ending censorship, ending DEI programs, and many others. The bill creates the America First Opportunity Fund, which will enhance United States leverage abroad and enable a rapid response to any potential crisis. It also creates the National Security Investment Program account, a new account that facilitates efficient strategic deployment of programs that support United States national security interests. Together, this prioritization, Mr. Chairman, there's my English barrier. You see that? That's right. Again, of resources ensures that our foreign policy is focused on making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. Now, critically important, the bill maintains all longstanding pro-life provisions alongside enhanced oversight and transparency measures to ensure that American taxpayer dollars do not fund abortions, a policy that Americans overwhelmingly support. Let me now go back to the numbers, which I mentioned at the beginning. The bill is a 22% cut below the fiscal year 25 enacted level. We are laser focused on reining in years of out-of-control, wasteful spending that characterized the previous administration. Let's face it, it was no secret to any of us that the previous administration was funding controversial, wasteful programs, and even programs that were actually harmful to our national security. We debated those issues extensively during our markups. However, the previous administration continued funding these controversial projects, which lead to the American people losing faith in our foreign assistance. I put prohibitions in this bill to address these disgraceful activities and to try to reassure taxpayers that their money would be spent to defend our national security interests. Prohibitions on drug shows, DEI hiring, on funding CCP laboratories. Now, at the time, some of you might recall, those prohibitions in the previous bill were criticized. Now it seems that we all agree that they should have never been there in the first place. Throughout this process, the goal is to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, represent our constituents' priorities in foreign assistance, and above all, to protect United States national security. This bill would not be what it is without the valuable input from each member of this subcommittee. Your thoughtful recommendations really have shaped the measure before you, and I am grateful for your contributions. Now, before I close, I also want to thank the staff on both sides of the aisle for their hard work. They have worked weekends, day, night. They have not stopped working, and we can never thank them enough. I would now like to recognize my friend, my Florida colleague, and the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Frankel, for her remarks. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and let me start by recognizing your collegiality and also the thoughtful members on both sides of the aisle. And I also want to thank the dedicated staff the committee staff, my own team for their hard work and guidance. It's an honor to serve as the ranking member of this committee. But above all, I want to express my deep gratitude to the public servants who bring American values to life around the world, diplomats, development professionals, and humanitarian workers. They have served some of the most dangerous and difficult places on earth. Many were recently forced out of their jobs, dismissed without cause or ceremony. To those who have served and to those still standing, you are patriots. You represent the best of who we are, and we owe you more than thanks. We also owe you the tools to do your job. Mr. Chair, with the right allocation and a White House that actually valued diplomacy, development, and humanitarianism, I believe we could have crafted a strong bipartisan measure worthy of our nation's leadership. Instead, I rise in fierce opposition to the Republican FY26 State Foreign Operations and Related Programs Bill, a reckless, short-sighted blueprint for American retreat. And it follows a deeply troubling pattern. The White House has illegally impounded foreign aid, dismantled USAID, gutted the State Department, all without input from Congress. More than 10,000 USAID staff were dismissed. Over 5,000 aid programs were axed. Just last week, 1,300 State Department employees were let go, entire offices eliminated. And all this in the middle of a global convergence of crises, armed conflicts, climate disasters, health emergencies, famine, mass migration, and rising authoritarianism. And this is not theoretical. These crises are slamming into us when fragile states collapse, migration surges. When we cancel trade support, American farmers and manufacturers lose customers. When we fail to build climate resilience, homes and crops are washed away. When global health systems fail, disease reaches our shores. And when the United States pulls back, China and Russia are right there to take our place. And worse still, our closest allies, pressured to increase military spending, are also cutting their foreign aid. So as global needs explode, the soft power of democratic nations is vanishing, and the vacuum left behind is going to be filled by regimes that don't share our values or interests. This bill slashes international affairs funding by 22% at $13 billion in deep, devastating cuts. It guts development and economic support. Children pulled from classrooms and left without clean water. Farmers cut off from tools that feed communities. Young entrepreneurs abandoned, fueling extremism and instability. Conflict prevention programs eliminated so violence erupts unchecked. Local organizations, our most trusted partners, shut down. It cuts humanitarian assistance by 42%. That's not just unwise, it's inhumane. Women and girls in conflict zones left without care after suffering horrific sexual violence. Refugees denied shelter, medicine, and hope. Food rations slashed below survival levels in places like Syria, Sudan, and Bangladesh. And millions of children dying from malnutrition. This bill is cruel, it's cold, and it is not who we are. And of course, Republicans couldn't resist another attack on women, reviving the global gag rule, gutting funding for the UN Population Fund, and shortchanging family planning, programs that save lives and lift up communities. This bill also abandons international institutions like the United Nations and the World Health Organization. It sidelines the United States from global decision-making, weakens our ability to promote peace and defend allies. It forces partners into the arms of authoritarian regimes and forfeits the power of burden sharing through institutions like UNICEF, the World Bank, and the UN. And it is putting China in charge of the world. And let me be blunt, these cuts are not abstract, they're deadly. In Nigeria, malnourished infants are dying because therapeutic food deliveries have stopped. In Miramar, hospitals are shutting their doors in the middle of a conflict. In Gambia, programs to support survivors of female genital mutilation have been halted just as the country debates legalizing the practice. And in Ukraine, wounded soldiers are going to go without care. In Afghanistan, pregnant women are being turned away from clinics. In Ecuador, women entrepreneurs stripped of support are being pushed towards our border. This isn't just a loss of aid. It's a loss of American credibility, a loss of moral authority, a loss of global influence, and it's going to cost us dearly. And why should American people care? Because when we fail to lead with compassion and common sense, the world becomes less stable, our troops face more danger, and we pay the price again and again. When we cut aid, we risk increased war. When we defund development, we undercut diplomacy, and when we turn our back on the world, we endanger our own. And I speak as the proud mother, a U.S. Marine veteran. I know many of the members here have also served our country. And we know what happens when diplomacy fails. When we fail to prevent conflict with education, aid, and engagement, the burden falls on the Pentagon and on families whose loved ones serve in the military. And let's remember, the entire international affairs budget has typically been less than 1% of federal spending, but it delivers exponential return for our safety, prosperity, and moral standing. These programs give youth an alternative to violence. They build markets for American goods. They prevent wars. They reduce migration pressures. They keep our troops home. And this bill, sadly, is a missed opportunity, a failure to lead, a failure to invest in the power of peace, progress, and partnership. But let me end with this, Mr. Chair and my colleagues. Democrats are not giving up. We stand ready to work with our Republican colleagues to fight for a bill that reflects our values, honors our commitments, and protects American lives. A sustained path to a safer, stronger, more prosperous nation cannot be built on isolation and threats alone. Because we cannot bomb our way to peace, we cannot drone our way to stability, and we cannot retreat our way to safety. A strong America leads, not with fear, but with courage, not by pulling back, but by reaching out. And that is the bill we should all be fighting for. And with that, I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. Let me, before recognizing the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, let me thank him for his support, his confidence, and all his help. It's an honor to recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Tom Cole.
Well, thank you, Chairman Díaz-Balart, and I want to thank Ranking Member Frankel, and certainly my friend Ranking Member DeLauro, the full committee, and all the members of the committee for being with us this morning. Before I enter my formal remarks, I want to make one quick observation to my friend, the chairman of the subcommittee. While you were very flattering and kind in saying that somehow I had renamed and redirected the committee, I think we all know the source of that was you. And I want to congratulate you on refocusing the committee and, frankly, anchoring it very firmly in the defense of our interests, the promotion of our values around the world, and doing it in a financially responsible way. It's an exceptional performance. I'm proud of the bill and very proud of you as the chairman. Our work on today's fiscal year 2026 National Security, Department of State, and Related Programs Appropriations Bill is a critically important step toward building a renewed and sharpened approach to United States foreign policy while also responsibly reducing spending. The legislation makes clear that we will not retreat from the cause of freedom. This bill prioritizes our national security through robust support of our allies and through stronger efforts to counter our adversaries. It supports essential efforts to advance democracy and defend human rights, as well as confront adversarial regimes like the Chinese Communist Party, the terrorist financiers of Iran, and the repressive Russian Federation. It reaffirms our steadfast support for our great ally Israel as they fight for their existence amidst terror and evil. And it supports important religious freedom programs abroad and maintains long-standing bipartisan pro-life protections. This measure realigns our foreign assistance to prioritize high-impact programs while also eliminating wasteful spending by strengthening oversight to prevent fraud and abuse. As we enhance and refocus America's leadership in the world, we ensure that Americans are safer at home and abroad without compromising fiscal responsibility. I thank Chairman Díaz-Balart, Ranking Member Frankel, and the majority and minority staff for their hard work. I look forward to consideration of this bill, which reflects a commitment to freedom and democracy. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, always a pleasure to recognize a distinguished member of the committee, and obviously the ranking member of the full committee, Congressman DeLauro.
Thank you. Thank you so much to my good friend Chairman Díaz-Balart and good friend Chairman Cole and Ranking Member Frankel. I too want to share my appreciation for the subcommittee staff, both sides of the aisle. In particular, I want to shout out Aaron Kolodziejski, Laurie McNone, and Ed Edstorm. And while I have the highest regard for my colleagues and friendship with them, I must oppose the bill before us today, which in my view dismantles American diplomacy and soft power, abdicates American leadership, yields the global stage to China and Russia, threatens women's health, and abandons people around the world. Never mind that we never received a complete budget from the White House. We are holding this markup in a completely unprecedented time, with the Congress's authority being challenged by a lawless administration. Since taking office, President Trump's administration has stolen resources appropriated by this committee, passed by Democrats and Republicans in the House and in the Senate, for programs and services across the federal government, including several in this bill, that protect and promote American interests and security around the world. Instead of being laser focused on the cost of living crisis, President Trump and Republicans are making it worse. Their big, ugly bill is handing massive tax breaks to the wealthy and to corporations while driving up the cost of living for hardworking Americans, all while the administration empowers billionaires and dismantles agencies and programs that save lives and protect our national security. President Trump is aggressively pursuing an America Last agenda that will not only see America become weaker, more isolated, and more ostracized. It is actively devastating impoverished regions and causing tragic, preventable death around the world. They empowered Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire who orchestrated the evisceration of USAID and a freeze on programs saving the lives of vulnerable people around the planet. Food grown by American farmers for people on the verge of famine, already on ships, was halted. Administration of life-saving treatments for diseases was stopped. Partnerships nurtured over decades to improve people's well-being were severed. Make no mistake, children will die because of these cuts. Today and in the future, it is despicable, it is shameful, and it is a stain on our nation that may never be fully erased. The funding freeze was made under the guise of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. But the American farmers who feed millions around the world are not waste, and the human lives they support are not either. I'm all for finding and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, something Inspectors General Richardson and Martin at State and USAID, respectively, were tasked with doing before they were illegally purged in the dead of night. And we are still waiting for these claims of waste to be brought forward. And just last week, the purges of our diplomatic corps continued at the Department of State, where career, nonpartisan staff who dedicated their lives to advancing American interests and who hold a wealth of irreplaceable knowledge and relationships were fired. If you were China or Russia, you would want it to weaken America. What would you do differently? This self-destruction is inexplicable, unfathomable, and unexplainable, and unforgiven. It may be easy for some people to look the other way and assume that these cuts are only inflicting harm on the other side of the world, but this affects all of our constituents. In New Haven, Connecticut's Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, or IRIS, brings hope and builds community in my district. They selflessly help refugees and immigrants navigate their lawful, these are folks who are vetted, they are here lawfully, their lawful presence and build their lives in America where they can be free from oppression, free from destitution, free to become an important part of their country's fabric and economy. But President Trump's order freezing grants for refugee resettlement agencies across America is throwing the Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, or IRIS, and the lives of the refugees into chaos. IRIS's director said, and I quote, "I work alongside Afghans who supported U.S. forces, came to the United States a few years ago, and they're still waiting for family to come. Some of them were expecting travel orders for their family at any time. All of that stopped," end quote. Snubbing our allies, turning our back to the world does not make us strong. It makes us weak. It makes us an unreliable ally and an untrustworthy partner. Unfortunately, this bill doubles down on this America Last agenda. It slashes humanitarian assistance by more than a third and foreign assistance by over 20%, creating a soft power vacuum that China is eager to exploit. And worse, the bill scapegoats our international partners, UN agencies, and NGOs that deliver life-saving aid to the most vulnerable people around the globe. Organizations, yes, like UNRWA, which this bill targets for political points, will be destroyed, making it harder to do the critical work and leaving children and families in Gaza and other places and around the world to starve and to die. When we are helping impoverished communities and nations treating diseases, when we are feeding starving children in conflict zones, when we help ensure villages have drinkable water, we are using and gaining soft power. We do these things because of our generosity. We also do these things because they are in our own interest. They build influence, our global standing, and strengthen our national security. When we retreat from the global stage, China and Russia fill in the gaps, and the world becomes a more dangerous place. Whose name is on that sack of flour? Whose name is on the door of the clinic? Whose name is on the school book? The United States of America, and it must remain that way. This bill puts women and children at risk by prohibiting funding for the United Nations Population Fund, slashing support for bilateral family planning and responses to gender-based violence, cutting over $300 million from programs that improve maternal and child health and fight infectious diseases. And this bill surrenders our efforts to combat the climate crisis, eliminating support for climate adaptability, clean energy, ignoring the nexus between climate conflict and migration, jeopardizing the safety and the security of our children, our grandchildren, and every generation to follow. I cannot support this bill, and I will not stop fighting to protect America's interests and against this administration's dangerous dismantling of our diplomatic and humanitarian efforts across the world. And I yield back.
Let me thank the ranking member. Do any other members wish to make remarks on the bill? Yes, Ms. Mayor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will also be speaking in opposition to this bill. Republicans came into power promising to lower costs for working families across our country. Instead, they are raising costs across the board by cutting programs that help the most vulnerable in America and around the world, all to cut taxes for the rich. We saw 2 weeks ago with the big ugly bill, which threw millions of Americans off health care and food assistance. We are seeing it again this week in the Senate with an ugly rescissions package that threatens some of the core pillars of American foreign assistance. This bill is no different. It cuts our national security budget, which was already underfunded, by another 22%, a full $13 billion below 2025 levels, which were already $20 billion under 2023 levels. At a time when humanitarian needs around the world continue to grow, this bill instead cuts almost $4 billion from humanitarian assistance, abandoning millions of people around the world in their time of greatest need, especially women and girls. This bill also hurts women and girls by banning funding to the UN Population Fund, slashing funds for life-saving international family planning programs, and codifying the Trump administration's expanded global gag rule. But more than that, this bill just doesn't make sense. Republicans have spent the past 6 months saying our foreign assistance didn't have enough oversight, that USAID went rogue. But this bill provides $23 million less than last year to oversee foreign assistance. This bill keeps funding for many, but not all, of our global health programs at 2025 levels. It even funds PEPFAR at $3.3 billion above the president's request. You might even think Republicans want to keep our global health programs strong. But just a few weeks ago, the House passed a bill that cut these very same programs, not just PEPFAR, by $900 million. And it's the same story for so many other programs, from women's empowerment to WASH, dedicating resources to them in theory, but in practice, gutting the infrastructure and people who make them possible. And without any additional guardrails that make clear to this administration that these dollars must be spent as Congress directs, what gives any of us confidence that the administration won't just ignore this bill if it's passed? This bill abandons U.S. leadership on the world stage and at the United Nations, threatens women's health globally, and would make the U.S. less safe, less strong, and less prosperous. It also reinforces this administration's reckless and illegal gutting of development and humanitarian programs by failing to stand up for the State Department, USAID, and the people who make American power possible. For those reasons, I sadly cannot support it today. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Alford, you're recognized, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, for this opportunity to speak on this important bill. I, for one, am very proud of the work that we have done on many issues in a bipartisan manner for this bill, particularly when it comes to PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, one of America's most impactful global health initiatives. Launched in 2003 by President George W. Bush, PEPFAR marked an historic commitment to combat HIV/AIDS, the largest by any nation to address a single disease. With over $110 billion invested, PEPFAR has saved more than 26 million lives, provided antiviral treatments to 20.6 million people, and prevented 5.5 million babies from being born with HIV. It has supported 83.8 million HIV tests, 327,000 health workers, building robust health systems in more than 50 different countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. Programs like DREAMS have cut new HIV diagnosis among adolescent girls by up to 40% in targeted areas. Beyond HIV, PEPFAR has strengthened global health security, aiding responses to other diseases which threaten our national security. Our subcommittee plays a critical role funding PEPFAR through annual appropriations, and we must ensure that funding continue to protect these gains until we can wean the programs off the American taxpayers, and we are doing that through this bill. That is why we are directing the State Department to develop a clear country-led transition plan that will empower partnering nations to sustain programs aligning with local health systems and global partners like the Global Fund. This ensures long-term success without reversing the decades of success and progress that we have seen. PEPFAR embodies American compassion and leadership. It strengthens our global security and our diplomacy. So I encourage this committee to continue to work together to guide a responsible transition plan to save lives and secure a healthier future. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Quigley, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you and the chairman of the full committee for our ability to work so well together. We appreciate that. But despite the committee's decision to rename the subcommittee the National Security Subcommittee, the bill in front of us today actually makes us less safe, our troops less safe, our embassy staff across the world, and our allies less safe. In FDR's last inaugural, he who had fought the isolationist and understood what isolationism meant in 1939, he spoke and said, "We have learned what happens over there affects us over here." He also said that we have learned that to have a friend, you need to be a friend. I think the actions taken by the administration and reflected in this bill, including tariffs against our closest allies, means that we will have far fewer friends, and as a result, we will be less safe. The bill officially dismantles USAID. It defends international emergency and refugee assistance. It reduces investments in PEPFAR and reduces maternal and child health funding with cuts to family planning, withdraws support for women's global health programs through the United Nations and other agencies. These cuts include $362 million used to help women and children fight infectious diseases. The front lines on the next pandemic aren't in New York or in California, they're across the sea. The bill goes even further to ban supporting the WHO and UNFPA organizations whose fundings are critical to keeping women and girls safe. It also cuts funding for the environment and conservation efforts, including wildlife trafficking. It also blocks funding to the Clean Technology Fund and the Green Climate Fund. It prevents the U.S. from enforcing and enacting any provisions of the Paris Agreement. It's a major setback to our handling of the global climate crisis. It's hard to believe that the issue of climate change is hardly in the news today because there are so many other issues the agents of chaos have brought forth. As the climate disasters worsen, it would only become more clear on how closely these issues are all connected. Earlier this summer, a peer-reviewed study in The Lancet estimated that USAID programs have saved over 90 million lives since the year 2000. They also estimate that the president's cuts to USAID will lead to over 14 million deaths by 2030, including 4.5 million children under the age of 5. The cuts to this bill will decimate life-saving programs and lead to countless preventable deaths. Across the world, our adversaries, namely Russia and China, are stepping up where we are pulling out. For many countries and regions, our international aid programs are the primary way they interact with the U.S. When we cut these ties, we lose relationships and, in some cases, push our allies toward our adversaries. I oppose this bill from a humanitarian perspective and from a national security perspective. As is so often the case, the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, is also the smart thing to do. But frankly, under the current administration, this bill doesn't matter. The Trump administration has decided that they can follow or ignore our appropriation bills at their discretion. And the rescissions bill hurtling through the Senate would upend so many of these programs that we funded in a bipartisan vote just months ago. Until my friends and colleagues on the other side of the aisle decide to stand up to the administration and reclaim the power of the purse, which was designated to us in Article 1 of the Constitution. This is all, frankly, a rhetorical exercise. Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Looking on this side over here. Ms. Torres, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. America was built on a simple promise: freedom over tyranny. We don't fund dictators. We don't abandon our citizens to torture chambers. That promise is being shredded before our very own eyes. This administration is actively strengthening relationships with regimes that partner with terrorist organizations. This bill isn't diplomacy. It is a blank check for bribes, black site deals, and backroom payouts to authoritarians such as El Salvador's President Bukele, a man who our own Justice Department alleges has deals with MS-13 gang leaders. And what does this legislation do? It rewards that behavior with our tax dollars, with diplomatic legitimacy, with a seat at the table while his regime runs torture chambers and shelters gang leaders responsible for killing Americans. This isn't diplomacy. This is complicity. This legislation doesn't just compromise our values, it puts Americans' lives in danger. When we fund terrorist supporting regimes, we're not defeating terrorism, we're bankrolling it. We're letting MS-13 and other criminal organizations operate with state protection while we provide the cash and cover. Who's going to tell the families of terrorism victims that we're now cutting deals with the very people who murdered their loved ones? Mr. Chairman, this is your bill. Are you going to tell the victims of MS-13 that they will never get justice for the overdoses, the violent murders, the rapes that these criminals have committed and facilitated on American soil because we are releasing MS-13 leaders into the waiting arms of the Bukele regime? We have a choice. We can continue down this path, selling out our principles for the illusion of security, empowering dictators while abandoning our citizens and making America complicit in the worst kinds of abuses. Or we can remember who we are. America does not bow down to autocrats. We do not empower terrorists. We do not use the State Department to disappear people into black sites and call it foreign policy. I oppose this bill because it allows too much funding for terrorist supporting regimes and because it guts the agencies that support American security, including those that help migrants integrate, find stability, and contribute to their home countries or local neighbors. Let's be clear. This legislation doesn't just fail the humanitarian programs that reduce migration and stop terrorism recruitment, it abandons American leadership on the world stage. This bill walks away from the table at the UN and hands our seat at the table to China and Russia. While they make global rules, we are too busy playing politics because the price of eggs was too high. That's not strength, that's surrender, Mr. Chairman. This bill sells out American leadership, American influence, and the key anti-corruption protections that safeguard American taxpayer dollars. It also zeroes out agencies like the Inter-American Development Bank that are on the front lines competing with China in Latin America and around the world. Once again, the 1% get richer off the backs of hardworking families, while this bill makes America less safe, less secure, and less prosperous. I cannot and will not vote to make America complicit in terrorism and authoritarianism. I urge my colleagues to vote no. Stand up. Stand up for our values. Put America's safety first over backroom political deals. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you so much. Do any other members?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I have just
for the record.
1 second? Thank you. The Atlantic publication just reported that the Trump administration gave the order to incinerate 500 tons of food aid that has been sitting in a warehouse that will expire, thanks to the aid freeze. That food has been sitting there. It's American farmers, and it's being, it will be incinerated. The other piece of this is they are also destroying and incinerating contraceptive supplies. Just want to put that on the record, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members want to make a statement? Seeing none. I note for the members, an errata insert on page 241 of the draft bill before you, which conforms the bill to the requirements of Section 3F of House Resolution 5 with respect to a spending reduction account. I ask unanimous consent that the insert be approved.